Shiitake only will grow on hardwoods, and that only certain hardwoods. So the most premier, the best ones to use are any variety of oak, white oak, red oak, whatever. Maples are fairly good, particularly sugar maple. Red maple is also really good. Norway maple, mixed results. I wish it was better. What else? Beech is quite good. Shiitake tends to do better with the harder hardwoods, and also ones that have fairly strong bark. And the reason that the bark matters is because that's really the protection that the log has against outside invasion. So if the bark is chipping, which it will start to do even after a couple of years, even if it's nice and tight like this, it's going to start allowing other invading fungi. So a good quality bark is important. Also, the time of year that you're cutting these logs is crucial. So generally, you want to cut your logs during the dormant season. That's anytime after leaf fall and before buds swell. Or you could extend that to bud break if you want. So really, in this, I don't live in this area of New Hampshire, but in my area, that's November through April, let's say, even earlier, through March.
When snow's on the ground, it's pretty safe bet.
When snow's on the ground, definitely safe. So I would, and I think that fits fairly well into the natural kind of work system of most farms and homesteads, right? So a lot of folks are doing a lot of timber cutting in fall or winter. So that's a really good time to be culling some of these logs as well. So we talked about the species you want to be using. We talked about when to harvest. Also, just be careful when you're working with a chainsaw. If you're starting to get a lot of cuts in the wood, that's going to be a problem. So you really, oftentimes, I'll see people have all these kind of strains, and it's not going to be worth using at that point. So try not to damage it. I know it's hard to control sometimes, but it's important. So the reason that, let me just say, so we also need to make sure that it's the right diameter. So 3 to 6 inches diameter this way, right, is what we're shooting for. This is on the small side. Some of these are, this is a really great size. That's, what is that, 4 or 5 inches? Anyone with mental? Yep. Okay. So this is really the size I'm looking for. Lengths can be variable. I like 3 to 4 feet, but you can do as little as a foot. But you're going to end up with all these kind of stumpy pieces. It's going to be a pain in the butt. So I would go with somewhere between 3 and 4 feet. And so once you cut them, if you're cutting them in, let's say, December or November even, you want to make sure they don't get dried out. Okay? It's super important. The key to success is to have great moisture in your logs. That's why a lot of times younger specimens are a little bit better because they have more sapwood to heartwood ratio. But also, if you're cutting them in November, December, there's a chance that, particularly if we're going to get a lot of snow, the winds are really going to dry out those logs. So you want to stack them up close together and maybe even put a tarp on top of them. Keep that moisture until you're ready to use them in April or May, which is generally when I do my shiitake cultivation. Once it gets a little warmer, you can still do it, but it's not ideal. I probably wouldn't cultivate them any later than June. At that point, they're not going to have a lot of time to establish themselves. Okay, any questions on selecting wood, species, size, how to get the wood that you selected? That's all really, really crucial. Okay, so once you have that, it's pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is we've got 4 drills here set up. I think there's a couple more plugins that we can use. We're going to be using, there's 2 different kinds of spawn that you can use for this. Sawdust spawn or dowel spawn. Dowel spawn is easier in some ways, because all you need is a hammer or mallet. For sawdust spawn, we need a specialized tool, which I'll show you actually. It's right here. It's basically a plunger. Okay, so I'll show you how we use it in a second. But this is basically used to deliver the sawdust spawn into the drills, the holes that we just drilled. And you can, I'll tell you where to find these later. So For sawdust spawn, we either are working with a 7/16 or 1/2" drill bit. And what we want to do is basically drill every 4 or 5 inches along the log, rotate it, and do a couple more rows. So the easy way to remember how many rows around to do is to figure out the diameter of the log. So this is, let's say, 4 inches. Okay. So we want to do about 4 rounds around the log. Okay. So 1 row, rotate, another row, rotate, another row, rotate, and 4. Okay. So figure about 1/4 pound per flush. So that's about 1/2 pound per log per year. And they'll fruit for up to 5 years. So, you know, it really kind of depends on how much you're going to do them and how much you're going to dry them. Right.
Oh, and then the drying, that's right.
Right. So for the first year, you're not going to get new mushrooms. Next spring is when you'll get your first flush, most likely. And at that point, 5 years out is where you're going. So
they'll push right through the wax and that's it.
They actually will come out through a variety of places along the log. Not just where you plugged it, but they'll bust them right through the bark in a variety of places. Yep.
Where do we start?
We're going to talk about that when we go for a walk right now.
Question,
Yeah.
you mentioned using beeswax,
Yes.
paraffin wax. What natural wax?
Beeswax.
But you said it doesn't work
So the issue I've had with beeswax is that with sawdust spawn, I've had a lot of critters basically, I'm not sure, it might be woodpeckers or not sure what, but they're going right through the wax and eating the sawdust spawn right out of logs. And I've noticed that with cheese wax more than anything else. Maybe it's the smell of the beeswax.
Beeswax.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but that's definitely been an issue for me in the past.
Okay.
So that's why I often add an extra layer of wax. And paraffin wax, I think, could be really helpful in that because the smell is not attractive. But, you know, it's a trade-off. It's a petroleum product. All right. Should we go for a walk?
Yes.
And harvest a few shiitakes and talk about how to lay them out? Okay. These shiitakes are ones that DAcres has plugged maybe a couple years ago, I'm going to say. Varying ages. Kind of untraditional way of laying them down, which we'll see. All right. Who can find a shiitake mushroom right now?
Oh my gosh.
Find at least, you should be able to see at least 2 probably. From
1,
wherever
2,
you're standing.
3.
Yep.
Is that one? Are these?
Yep.
With a nice decoration.
That's it.
there?
Yep. So you'll notice that there's a pretty interesting. This is the first time I've ever seen shiitake logs laid out in this way. They basically just line their path with them here, which is a very interesting idea. It's in some ways it's not ideal if you're really going for high production, but if you're going for easy picking and never forgetting that when your logs are fruiting, this is a great strategy.
That was our issue. We did have them back down deep in the woods, stacked like Lincoln logs, and we'd be like, oh yeah, go back there. Oh wow, those must have been some really nice shiitakes. So that's why they're laid out here now,
Yep.
because they're remembered.
Exactly. So yeah, every time you go for a walk, there they are. So I want to talk about some different laying strategies, but I also want to pick all the shiitakes that are ready along this path right here. I'm not sure how much they've been picking them, but if anyone wants to harvest them, you could probably pull it out. Actually, and let me just point out. Yeah, this right here, this is a great specimen. This is a good size to be harvesting. So you notice the cap is still a little bit concave. Mm-hmm. Which one's the one where it's going down?
It's one of those. We know
One of those two. You know. Couple key indicators for shiitake. Again, a little bit variety dependent, but this kind of white fuzzy perimeter, very common. There's really no poison lookalikes that grow right off a log that you can confuse shiitake for. Very easy to identify. White gills usually grows at an angle, kind of going up. They'll straighten out as they get more mature. That's a little bit past its peak. I would dry that. That's going to be a little bit fibrous at this point for eating. You can see one of the dangers, I guess, or fallbacks of this kind of laying scheme is that you're going to get a lot more pest damage this way. But, Do you want to use this?
And you
That's,
recommend
that's a personal call.
You recommend
A knife.
cut it rather than just a break.
You could break them if you want. Yeah, either way.
It won't damage the mycelium.
So anyway, I'll put it in there. But yeah, the longer you wait, the more damage you're going to get. So this is a little past time, but really beautiful design. So, what's that? Oh yeah. So again, the fruiting is going to be triggered. So in the spring and fall, usually after heavy rain, it takes about a week for them to really grow out. So what I usually do is I'll lay them somewhere where I'm walking, but over to the side a little bit. This is a perfect place. This is actually what I was thinking about for laying here, is to make essentially a log cabin stack right over here on the side. And anyone want to guess why this might be a good spot?
Moisture.
Moisture, right? So first of all, it's kind of a low area. And second of all, there's a stream right here. The reason that a stream could be really helpful is what's called is for force fruiting. So there's two different strategies to get your shiitake mushrooms. You can either let them naturally fruit in the spring and the fall, usually, after heavy rain, or you can force fruit them. And this is what all commercial growers who are using this method are going to do, because it gives you a lot more control, gives you a lot more, the yields tend to be shorter, but also much heavier. The way to do that is you have to know the time of year to be expecting fruit. So for example, if I'm using a cold weather variety, I might be expecting fruit in April, depending on where you are. I'll come out here, I'll take my stack, which has been sitting for 1 full year at that point, untouched more or less, and I will put them into a stream or a pond or a trough, whatever I have available, or use irrigation to just kind of wet them down. And I'll let them stay in there for 1 to 2 days. And that will saturate that log with some water. And that's a trigger for it to fruit. And after a couple days, I'll restack them or lean them up against like an A-frame or some trees, whatever you got. And at that point, I would be looking for fruit in the next week or 2 weeks. Okay. And that's where you really tend to get really full, a whole log can be covered sometimes with shiitakes. It can be pretty amazing. So again, how much work do you want to put into it though? You want to just kind of let it passively fruit and walk by and collect your mushrooms every once in a while? Or do you want to get enough to really, to get some sales or to dry enough for the winter time, whatever you want to do. So those are the two basic strategies. The lifespan for a log is about 5 years or so. Again, the first year being the year after you've inoculated. So this is year 0, next year is year 1. Okay. So we're going to get, if we're force fruiting, we're going to do that at least twice a year. Okay. Spring and fall usually, but some people will force fruit them more, even more than that, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So yeah, in terms of maintenance, there's really not much to it. You just want to make sure that they're stacked in an area where they're going to be protected from sunlight and protected from heavy winds, and where they're going to get some moisture. Okay. A lot of people do irrigate them every once in a while for maintenance. Definitely not essential unless you're working in a really dry area. So that's all there really is to it, maintenance-wise. Any questions?
If you were to do the strategy here, laying them on the ground, given the fact that you drilled holes at 90 degrees or less all the way around, it's probably a guarantee that one row of those holes is going to be face down.
Yeah, you're not going to get any fruit out there.
So that's wasted effort.
Well, not really, because they'll only fruit once the log is fully colonized. You should be able to see where you cut it, mycelium, the white pattern on the edges. That's when you know that log is ready for fruiting. And it's going to put all of its energy into fruiting. It doesn't really matter the direction. So if you limit it on one direction, it's not going to limit the overall fruit.
But if you wanted to do something like this, if you put the ends of each log up on a little block to hold it so it's not laying right on the ground, that you might expect.
I'm not sure if it's going to actually increase your yields. I think it'll put more of its energy on the sides it has available. Okay. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's a good question. Oftentimes when I do a stack, I'll put them up on a pallet first, just because those ones that are on the bottom, there's a higher likelihood that they can become invaded by foreign mycelium, by foreign fungus. Questions came up. Actually, someone asked about other species that this same technique works well with. Lion's mane is an excellent choice For oaks particularly, oysters, also there's a variety of oysters. They all work well, but I would choose a softer hardwood. Something like birch, or maybe a poplar. What else is a good soft? Ash could be a good choice. Actually, ash works fairly well for shiitake as well. Yeah. So that's a great option. Another thing to do, similar method, slightly different, is to inoculate a stump after you've logged it or after the trees come down. You can basically drill right around into the sapwood. Put your sawdust spawn or your dowels in there, cover it with some wax, and basically, at that point, hope it'll fruit. It's a more long-term process. It can take a couple of years, but for hen of the woods, for maitake, also known as, that's a great option, particularly if you just cut down an oak, because they're pretty specific to oaks generally. But yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities for playing around with this stuff, and I would really encourage you to experiment. There's still so much left to be learned. I think we're only going to learn it by experimenting and sharing the results. There's a great Facebook forum called the Mushroom Identification Forum. If you put some pictures on there and tell them where you are and when you found it, there's definitely going to be a mycology geek on there who will tell you what it is. It's amazing. It's an incredible resource. What else? Oh, materials. I don't particularly have one vendor that I really like, but I tend to buy a lot of stuff from Field and Forest Products out in Wisconsin. I've had really great results. They have good prices. They have all the plunging tools that we were using. That's where I bought those from. I think they're pretty exclusively carried by those guys. If you just Google Field and Forest Products, it'll definitely come up. Really great customer service too. There's a couple of local guys. There's Fungi Ally in Massachusetts. Witchland Woods is one in New Hampshire. He's great. Dave Witchland. Witchland Woods.
Witchland?
Yep. He does some workshops. He sells spawn. He's even cultivating some morels on his property. So pretty cool stuff going on over there. In terms of books, literature, there's a couple guides. If you Google UVM, University of Vermont Shiitake Guide, that's an excellent resource online. Free, it's a PDF, and it goes into a lot of the stuff we covered today and more. Also, of course, there's all the books by Paul Stamets. He's well-known, very respected mycologist. Growing Gourmet Medicinal Mushrooms, I think is one of his books. It's a little bit more for the professional commercial grower. Mycelium running is more for low-tech cultivation. What else do I like? Cornell is a great resource for all things mushrooms. There's a couple guys. What's his name? Steve. I can't remember his last name. If you Google Cornell mushrooms, there will be some excellent guides on a lot of the topics that we covered today and a few others. They're doing some great research out there. And a couple of the guys who work with them published a book recently called Farming the Woods, which also goes into mushroom cultivation, as well as everything else that you can grow in New England, northeastern woods. So that's everything from ginseng to pawpaw and wood edge to I think they even talk about grafting nut trees, that kind of thing. I think that's most of the resources that I want to mention. Do you guys have any questions about anything we covered? Any ideas, thoughts? Yeah.
I just want to make sure. So, if one of these holes wasn't plugged adequately enough, and other spores do get in,
so they're going to compete for space. They're both going to try to colonize the log. They're going to meet somewhere, and that's basically where they're going to stop growing. It's not that one will kill the other. It's just that they'll have reduced space.
okay.
So you'll still get fruit, even if there is a competition in there.
And that fruit is safe.
The fruit's totally safe, but it's not going to fruit as heavily because it won't have as much resource available to it, as much food, essentially. Good question.
So what about interplanting with your established perennial gardens?
Yeah.
Do you have to think about competing things, or they
No.
coexist?
Yeah, I mean, they're only going to be, are you talking about like a wine cap type of installation, or
I guess just in general.
They're only going to be going after dead material because they're saprophytes, the ones that we're using. So they're not. Are you, like, do you mean now competing the plants or?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going to be competing for the same resources. They actually will be beneficial to each other because as the carbon breaks down, it's going to create nutrition for the plants over time. So definitely a great place, to introduce them as in perennials, though. Cool. I just want to mention one last thing. I work for the Northeast Organic Farming Association in Massachusetts, and there's a summer conference coming up for all the NOFA chapters in the Northeast. Each state has its own chapter. There's a summer conference happening in August. There's a ton of workshops, lots of homesteading, farming, herbalism, mushroom-related workshops, really anything you want. It's a 3-day conference in Amherst, Mass, at the UMass Amherst campus. So if you're interested, feel free to grab a postcard. Should be a really